And what I will do is, if I'm sure you can hear others because you can hear me, as questions come up, we'll try and keep the questions at the end, and I'll also watch the chat box too.
Okay. What I did for my...
So you're doing great.
It's a good thing Jerry was pushing me to get ready early.
See, tonight when you thought you were going to be worried about presenting tomorrow, you won't be.
That's right. I don't know if any of you guys ever saw You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, the play.
Mm-hmm.
In there, there's a song about a book report.
You come every second.
He says, I work best when I'm under pressure. Okay.
That's how you get your creative juices flowing. You got to have that stress hormone.
So this is me, right?
That's right.
The video's not on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I know that because of this,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my mute button.
Yep.
So I'm not
You
mute.
are not muted.
We can hear you.
Brian, you're now muted. So it looks like most of you are, which is great. Again, welcome everybody out. We've got about 2-3 more minutes before we get started. Glad everybody could join us. Just as a commercial, if as most of you know, every week I send you the connection information. What I've been doing now is developing a list. So if you tell me that you want on the list, I will send you the connection information every week. I usually send it out on Friday for the next Tuesday because we're doing these every Tuesday at noon. I'm happy to add you on that list instead of having you have to every week contact me. I'm just not willing to forego the security of sending this out. And so far I've been lucky. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I haven't had any problems yet with people trying to connect in. So
should we email you that then to be on the list?
just email me, yes, and say on Tuesday list, I'll know what you're talking about, and I will make sure you're on the list. Doesn't mean you have to participate. Just means that you will automatically get the connection information for next Tuesday program. Speaking of
thank you.
program, the next one will be on soils and fertilizers, and that'll be for next Tuesday at noon.
Thank you.
It's always fun when somebody has the weed eater right outside your window. Don't forget to turn off or to please mute. I'll ask that we have questions at the end. You can either unmute yourself for your question or throw a question out in the chat box, and we'll try and respond to Carolyn that way.
Gary, I have no idea where the chat box is.
Don't worry about it. I'll get the questions to you.
Great. Okay.
We're just happy to have your program right up on the screen so everybody can see it. I think we're doing fantastic.
Okay.
Yep. Technology is a very rewarding experience. Every time you make a small advantage to it, you feel like, wow, I've overcome so much to get this far. So, great. So, I have 12 o'clock. Let me go ahead and get started. Welcome you all out. Thank you for joining us. The program for next Tuesday is soils and fertilizers. I'll be sending that out. Again, if you would like to be placed on the list to be notified every week of the connection information, I send it out on Fridays. Just email me and go Tuesday workshop list. I'll put you on that list, and then you'll automatically get the connection information. And part of that is if you don't call in, and it hasn't been changing lately, but if I do get into a security problem, I may have to change it. And it's for that reason, that's why I'm sending it out weekly to people. So with that, Carolyn, I'm going to introduce Carolyn Winchell. Carolyn is a master gardener. Have her on today. She has waded through version 10 and managed to get her program up and happy to speak. So Carolyn, I'm going to turn it over to you again. If everybody would mute their or hit the mute button, Carolyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Gary, thanks. Well, we talked a little while back about doing a class, I thought, on when to plant. Gary thought what to plant. So we talked about it, and I'm going to do when to plant, but it kind of runs into what to plant also. So I'd just like to share a little of our journey. Gary and I moved up on the hill here about 40 years ago. And when we moved here, our neighbors told us, and we're about 1,000 feet, our neighbors told us don't ever plan on planting anything before June 1st because of the cold and so on. So this was a growing experience for us along the way, and I'd like to share some of the things that we've done and when we plant and why not. And so here's some things that I thought we might want to consider. First of all, location, location, location. We kept hearing about people in Longview that were planting much earlier than we did, and we realized that at our altitude, that made a difference in how early we could plant and cold and so on. And I ran across something some years ago that said every so many hundred feet in elevation translates to so many miles north, but neither Gary nor I could turn that up, so I'm not going to cite you that. I think when we're at 1,000 feet, we're the equivalent of some distance north as far as planting times go. So obviously, with planting, there's things like microclimate. We have neighbors that are just down the road who are in a bit of a dip of the road, and it comes down and you can feel the cold when you walk in there. So obviously where you are is going to make a difference too. Are you on a south wall? Do you have reflected heat from that? Do you have a lot of sun? Do you have a lot of wind? And then timing. Timing's going to make a difference for each one of us. We have found along the way that we could adjust our timing by using raised beds, by using cloches, by using black plastic ground cover, hoop houses, and by growing plants inside. So we started out, and we had been reading about raised beds and put in raised beds, and we had, I think it was 55 pickup loads of horse manure plus 12 yards of chicken manure one year in our garden. It had lots of organic material. And what we found was that even in the winter, the soil was still crumbly and wet instead of clay and dry, or clay and hard. So that was the beginning of our recognition that raised beds and for us some organic matter made a difference in how plantable our soil was. And then we ran across a book called The Maritime Northwest Garden Guide, and it has become our planting Bible. I don't know if some of the rest of you are familiar with that. It was put up by Seattle Tilth. It's been reprinted more recently, and that has just become our planting Bible, at least as a basic go-to guide. It gives you month by month planting schedules, what to plant inside, what to plant under a cloche, what to plant indoors. And so when it comes close to February, I dig it out and start looking, okay, what do we plant now? So most of this information comes from this garden guide. Then we discovered the little Jiffy greenhouses, and I put them on the windowsill because I wasn't having very good luck with germinating some of my seeds out in the garden early on. And I discovered that if I put these in the windowsill, I could get lettuce a lot sooner and I could plant it out, and I didn't wait for it to rot. So that was obviously, there's other versions of that that go on, but this is like, I think, $257 on Amazon or Home Depot. There's obviously bigger and fancier versions always of starting plants early. But one of the other things that, well, I'll share this with you. One of the things that we learned along the way was the benefit of a garden fork. If we had our raised beds basically prepared in the fall, in the spring, early spring, when it was way too wet for us to till, we could take our garden fork out there and work up the beds and plant way earlier than we could, simply because we didn't have to have a tiller. And that's what we did this year. We didn't use our tiller at all, but it allows us to plant earlier. So February, here's a list of plants to sow outdoors: carrot, golden, flax, arugula, radishes, garlic, cloves, shallots, potato, onions, fava beans, snow peas, shelling, and snap peas. Here's our indoor growing area on the left. Above are actually garlics we planted last fall, but obviously we can plant them now. And then on the right are fava beans and sugar snaps and snow peas. And then for your cloche garden, you can plant oriental greens, carrots, parsley, broccoli, cabbage, mustard, arugula, beets, spinach, lettuce, endive, cilantro, with some protection there. So for us, we found growing indoors gave us better germination, and it gave us a significant a start on the head date, on the start dates, when our book said that we could plant. We started putting out transplants because they seem to do pretty well at that. March, you can expand your list, and I have not included the things on these lists which were previously in the previous month listed as being able to be planted, and this is not the total list, but you can see lettuce, onion sets, parsley, cress, turnips, oriental greens, spinach, Swiss chard, and garbanzo beans, which is the first time we've grown these this year. It's the first time for us of those. This is our garden, March 30th. Actually, it was a little before that. We planted our kale on the far side, collards, broccoli. We had starts and put them out. We put row cover over them, floating row cover, and that night it snowed. And they did fine. And we also planted our sugar snaps and fava beans there at that time. If you were to look around, you would see in the very front, center, bottom, those are carrots that were overwintered, and on the right at the bottom is parsley that we've used all winter. We also had collards and kale we used all winter as well. So here's March cloche garden: carrots, parsley, broccoli, cabbage, mustard, arugula, beets, lettuce. We had our row cover over them for probably a week and then didn't worry about it anymore. There's just floating row cover example, obviously on a bigger scale than ours. April, you can expand to cilantro and dill and parsnips, flat leaf parsley, the other cold kohlrabi, and so on. Potatoes. And
selling them anymore. Although we didn't walk around, we didn't go that far down on Parkway.
okay, and then cloche for April: carrots, parsley, broccoli, cabbage, beets, lettuce. And to sow outdoors, and they start splitting this up into what you can sow beginning early April and later April: cabbage, scarlet runner beans, lamb's quarters. We had our cabbage in the garden from end of March. And actually last year, we had been growing tomatoes inside, and we were going to my class reunion, and we were going to be away for 2 weeks at the beginning of April and on. And so we put out black plastic and put our tomatoes in and made a hoop house, and they survived. I can't say they loved it, but they did fine. So here's a more recent picture of our favas and our sugar snaps and our kale behind Jerry there. May, more things to plant. You can do your pole beans and your New Zealand spinach. Pak choi we've had out since April, end of March. Shelling beans, sweet corn, which I don't have planted yet. Potatoes, marjoram, some are savory, some of those herbs. Jerry got the itch to plant squash early this year. He planted it indoors in February. I'm going, this is going to be too early. Well, this was in our greenhouse. And then he said, these are taking over our greenhouse. I'm putting them outside, and I'll show you a picture later of the results. This is our kale colored broccoli and all on May 3 here. So May, cloche garden, summer squash, winter squash, melons, cucumber, basil. And we have basil out in our herb garden. I put it out last week. It's a little chilly, but it's doing all right. Here we have lettuce, we have onion starch, cilantro, beets, parsley, and potatoes, and then the carrots at the end that we are still harvesting some of those. On the right, we have in bloom kale and I think kale now. We took out the collards. And on the left here at the bottom is chickpeas. If you've never grown them, it was just a different kind of look than I'd run into before. We put out our beans and we made a row cover, floating row cover over top of our trellis, and it does nicely, and it saves us time from having to acclimate them from the greenhouse, and it keeps the birds away. So here in the front is parsley. We've overwintered, and then bok choy planted in March, and the other things you've seen. This is our squash. It was a little sad. It sat out there and shivered. Some of it turned sick. I wondered if it was going to die, but it's actually doing fairly nicely now. And we have some zucchini that are probably 4 or 5 inches long currently. Just another picture of our row cover over our beans and so on. This is lettuce. It's one of my favorite ones. It's Territorial Super Salad Gourmet Blend, I think. It's just such a beautiful bunch of lettuce. I love it. June, cucumbers and summer squash, then they can do well. And then in July, we start talking about fall and winter gardens. And one of the places I have trouble is remembering to leave any space or clear out space for these things. So you can start planting these things that will do nicely come fall and growing through the winter. Late July, more of the fall winter garden things. And there are different overwintering broccolis and cabbages and so on. And then September, cabbage for spring harvest, spinach, radishes, lettuce. Late September, carrots. We don't do well planting carrots that late. We have to start them a little earlier, I guess, here because of the cold. And your grains. All we've ever done is some oats for cover crops. I can't tell you anything about that. Fava beans again, snow peas, beets, lettuce, spinach. And then garlics and shallots, multiplier onions, and so on to go over the winter. And November, you can still plant garlic and fava beans. I think one of the things that the Maritime Gardener's Guide pointed out to us was that because we live in the Maritime Northwest, we have the privilege of year-round gardening, which most parts of the country don't have. And so it's been nice to explore and expand. For us, it's been worth pushing the envelope some just to see if it works. And most of the time we do win, not always. So there's parsley from the winter, garlic from last fall, and our kale, and we had collards that we harvested all winter long. And that's all I have to say. So, any questions?
Thank you, Caroline. Go ahead and unmute if you have a question.
Hi, I was wondering if that book is still available?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. In fact, I just ordered an updated, it's updated and expanded. When I was looking for a copy of the page here, I looked it up and it's been expanded quite a bit and it is available. I think it's about $24.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions?
Wow.
Yeah, so I noticed you were putting your summer squash on a trellis, and I've never seen that before. How did the squash hang from that?
Well, because I've seen, when we were in Master Gardeners, Helen Redmond and Jerry and I did a project on vertical gardening and saw squash growing on trellises like that. So we thought, well, why not? And that spot happens to be the warmest spot in our yard. It's a south wall. It gets reflected heat from metal building. And so we thought, well, let's see how it does. And so we just decided we'd save some garden space by growing up.
It makes sense. I'm just kind of wondering how the zucchini or things like that hang. Don't they break off?
Okay, this is our first year doing this, so I can't tell. Well, I can tell you a little. We did a Sugar Hubbard, I think, last year. My husband hung it on the trellis that were the wires that we had for our berries and overwhelmed the berries, but it hung on just fine.
Huh. Interesting.
I had a question about insects and worms with root crops. How do you handle, you have a problem with that?
We haven't had much problem. We have on occasion pulled a carrot that has the bottom eaten out of it, but most of the time we really haven't had much issue. So I'm not any good at helping you with that.
I've had a problem with white moth, which basically just makes channels in my radishes. And I've basically just had to stop planting them and plant them in container gardens away from the regular garden.
Huh?
And that works for you?
Yeah, it seems to for some reason. For some reason, having them just in the potting soil away from the regular garden, the white moth doesn't seem to matter. But the white moth maggots basically just eat circles around my radish. So.
Huh.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I would mention, if you do have problems with plant diseases or something that's eating your crops or things like that, send me an email. I have my Master Gardener clinic, which is free. I have several Master Gardeners that are really good at diagnosing problems. If you have something, you can take pictures of it. You may not want to come in. Take pictures, send the pictures and the problem to me, and we'll come up with a reply for you.
Okay, great. I'll do that.
Other questions out there?
Yeah, did you talk about tomatoes and what's the best time to plant? I can't remember seeing them on your list.
You're right. I think June is what the book says. We talked with Michael McKee. He and his wife had Willow Grove's CSA, and he told us, he said, plant on black plastic. We put black plastic out and put it through because he said it warms it up. His take also was to let them sprawl because he thought they would get more heat that way off of the black plastic. We have tended to push it some and put it on black plastic and put plastic over top, but we tend to get blight up here if we don't have them covered.
Yep. And I hate to keep taking everybody's time. So what about hot peppers? Do you guys have any luck with making hot peppers up here?
We, my husband grew ghost peppers and Carolina Reapers this year in the greenhouse. We haven't taken them out yet. It's our first time. We have grown sweet bells up here, early ones, and they've done very nicely.
And is that also on top of black plastic?
Yeah, I think we did. And then we tended also to keep row cover over it all year, which my understanding is it increases the temperature by 3 to 5 degrees.
Okay.
Hey, Carolyn,
Uh-huh.
For that question on peppers, I did an experiment up here in Winlock last year.
Good.
I grew peppers in the greenhouse and peppers outside, and the peppers in the greenhouse just surpassed the peppers outside by, it was just unbelievable how much
Really?
more I got out of the greenhouse peppers.
Wow. We have some Italian sweet peppers in the greenhouse right now that are probably 6 inches long. They're beautiful. But
Other questions? We have a few master gardeners online too. As you can tell, they're happy to share their experiences. So please. Oh, and somebody asked, I know that Alice replied, Carolyn, what city are you in? And Carolyn and her husband Jerry live in Longview.
yeah. We're up on Columbia Heights, so we're 1,000 feet here.
I put the link to the Seattle Till book you're talking about on the chat. If you can't find your chat, there's a button at the bottom of your screen that says chat.